Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by VECKTA. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at VECKTA.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. All right, welcome everyone back to another episode of Renewable Rides. And today I'm super excited to be joined by Jetson Juopperi, who is the Director of Strategy and Market Intelligence at FuelCell Energy. Welcome, Jetson.
Thank you, Gareth. I appreciate it. And great pronunciation on the last name. That was perfect.
I've been practicing it all morning. So we always like to start, Jetson, with just finding out a bit more about who we're talking to. And a great way to do that is just understanding what are you passionate about.
Sure. So I'm sort of a young middle career energy professional. I've got about 10 years in the energy space, but only the last year and a half to 2 years has been spent, closer to the cutting edge and the energy transition. I do have an engineering background and got my start in the industry with General Electric with combustion turbine technology, something that I still find extremely fascinating, but having grown up in that part of the energy space sort of made me, give me a perspective on where the industry is going and obviously an interest in trying to get involved there. So about 2 years ago, I joined FuelCell Energy, which is, a very, by comparison, niche space in the energy industry and has a suite of products very different from sort of the conventional power generation methods that we're all familiar with, whether it be fossil-based or solar and wind. And it's been a wild ride. Fuel cells, distributed generation, hydrogen production, carbon capture. We kind of have fingers in all of these spaces and are trying to get our footing in each according to our, their respective strengths. So it's been a ride. It's been very interesting, and I imagine it'll continue to be quite interesting as we continue to grow and learn and evolve as the industry evolves.
Yeah, it's a very dynamic market, isn't it? And I'm excited to dig into fuel cell energy and what you guys do and learn more about that. On a personal level, what do you do for fun outside of work?
Yeah, so I recently moved to New York City. So I historically have been really interested in hiking and trail running and general outdoors. Since moving to a more urban center, it's been a bit more difficult. But I do have a hiking trip planned in the Himalayas in April of 24. So I think I need to figure out a way to get out of the city and get some practice in. Otherwise, I'll be in rough shape next year. So, of course, I still appreciate the outdoors and I appreciate traveling. I appreciate that we've moved to a stage in this sort of post-pandemic world where traveling is a bit more open now. And I've got a nerdy side too. I play some chess, online chess here and there, and some video games here and there. So I keep that nerdy side alive as well.
That's great. And so what was it? Was it family background that kind of got you into the outdoors and hiking and running, or how did you find yourself?
I grew up in a rural area in Central Florida, and I think when you grow up in that kind of environment, you have aspirations to figure out what a city's like. And so at the age of 18, I moved to Boston for undergrad, and it was great, and I loved it. It was a great experience, and I still love urban hubs and all that they offer. But and then once you start spending enough time in those sorts of environments, you sort of miss and long for having some fresh air and space to move around. And so, sort of after undergrad, I was able to live more out in the mountains in upstate New York, and I really appreciated that. It there's just something, I think it's universal. Who doesn't love getting out, hiking a mountain, getting a view from the top, just some of the freshest air you can breathe. And, but I guess it's a balance. It's nice to have a little bit of sort of urban life, but then be able to get out and get some fresh air, some good exercise.
So tell me about the Himalayas trip. How long is it for? What's the game plan?
Oh man, it's going to end up being about 2 weeks, I expect, between air travel, the logistics to get up into the mountains, and then I believe it's about 7 or 8 days hiking along a ridge called the Annapurna Sanctuary Trail. If you're familiar, you probably will be. Before a friend of mine helped coordinate this, I was not familiar with some of the different treks and ridge trails in the Himalayas, but apparently it's a fairly popular one. And so we'll get our start in Kathmandu.
Nice.
And so we'll get to experience a little bit of sort of Nepalese culture, I suppose, and then hopefully some extremely challenging but rewarding hiking, and what I expect to be some world-class views up here in the Himalayas.
That's amazing. I actually just got back from a little backpacking weekend that I went away with one of our investors for a couple of nights. We actually got to see the first snow of the season. So we woke up Saturday morning to like 4 inches of snow at 11,000 feet. Oh, wow. So it was one, it was a bit of a surprise, but two, it was a beautiful way to start the day. The whole landscape had changed, and there's nothing better than being out there. And I think it's a cool way to find out a lot about yourself and the people you're with.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hopefully you packed well enough to navigate that, huh?
Yeah. The power of Gaia. I don't know whether you use Gaia, the app, for your map reading, but it meant you can literally pull out your phone and be on trail even though you can't see it. It's super awesome. Highly recommend.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
I have used Strava, has some trail running functionality as well, but maybe Gaia is better suited if it's.
Yeah, check it out. The map overlays are insane. You can do everything from cell phone service to wildfires to overlanding to mountain bike trails. It's really powerful. I love it.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so tell us about your journey from life in Florida through to New York and how you got into FuelCell Energy.
Oh man, it's a long story. I was always math and science focused. So for, wanting to escape the rural South and run off to the sort of urban Northeast, decided to pursue chemical engineering because I was told it would be challenging. And I figured somewhere along the way, I'll find a passion. I'll find something that, calls me. And I explored a couple different aspects of chemical engineering, which many refer to as glorified plumbing. And in many cases, that's true. Process engineering, there's a lot of, fluid dynamics and sort of kinetics, sort of molecular interactions and stuff that really, were interesting, but didn't really speak to me, I guess you might say. And I had an opportunity to work as in an internship capacity with General Electric's project finance division. So they were doing some of the technical due diligence on energy projects, power projects, whether it be, they had coal in their portfolio at the time, but there's a lot of gas combined cycle. There's a lot of solar, and actually probably predominantly wind, because the business was really sort of in part meant to support the proliferation of GE wind turbine technology. So it was a great, opportunity to get a view of the energy landscape from the finance perspective. So yes, you get, some technical due diligence. You understand some of the technical risks associated with the technology, but you also get a view of the market risks. Why are these projects being developed in the first place? Are they serving a purpose in an underserved area? Is there a market opportunity to capture high, nodal prices?
Yeah.
Are they qualifying for were ITC or PTC incentives, which were huge at the time and still remain to be, obviously, in this Inflation Reduction Act world. So,
Yep.
and it felt very dynamic. It felt like it was we were on the precipice of a change from sort of conventional technologies of the 20th century to the technologies of the 21st century. So at that point, I was stuck in the energy space and got a full-time gig with General Electric in the commercial space, supporting new combustion technology going into the market, as well as servicing their existing fleet, which was just hundreds and hundreds of megawatts of combustion turbines across the United States.
That's super interesting, Jetson. So how did you go from combustion turbines and General Electric to fuel cells?
It's a great question. A bit of an interesting one. I spent those years at GE working in the commercial space, doing business intelligence work initially, supporting proposals, just sort of supporting the commercial process for our sales teams. And then ultimately the last 2 years at GE operating in sales, working directly with our customers, which was an interesting time because I was supporting the Northeast from a sales perspective, and I got to see firsthand how some of our customers were really struggling. In the Northeast, it's maybe comparable in some sense to the West of the United States, in that states have policies to decarbonize. And some of our, my customers, users of General Electric combustion turbine technology, weren't really running very often. They weren't called upon from an economic sense to support, their customers, and, their cash flow suffered. And I just saw that, this is a trend it's going to continue. Conventional sort of, fossil assets are going to struggle increasingly. And there's two sides of that coin. OEMs like GE could need to continue to support those assets to the best of their ability, and understand that in some cases, in many cases, they serve an important function for, reliability as a backup to renewables, or we want as much renewables on the grid as we can get, but you don't want to necessarily decommission these sites in case you come upon times where the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing and we don't have the battery storage on the grids just yet. So, but the flip side to that was just understanding that, for career longevity, it might be interesting to start getting some experience on the other side of the fence. And so I actually had an old colleague, a mentor, join a fuel cell company, and decided to start building out a commercial organization, including some of the functions that I had supported in the past. He wanted some market intelligence. He wanted some commercial strategy support, commercial operations management. So sort of tapped me, and I was at the right time and place in my life and career that I kind of took the leap, joined FuelCell Energy, and I think it was 2020, I believe, 2021. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride. We've grown quite a bit from a personnel standpoint. We've gotten so much functionality in place in the organization in terms of, like I mentioned before, the commercial capabilities, commercial process management, but then also product management. One of the most interesting things about FuelCell Energy right now is that we're bringing really new and interesting technologies to market. One that we haven't supported commercially in the past, but then also in some cases have never been seen in the market before. And I hope we get a chance to talk about some of those.
Yep.
Trigeneration being one of them. Really, FuelCell Energy plays in first of a kind technologies, which can be a little uncomfortable at times, but is also extremely exciting about bringing a new technology, never before seen type capabilities into the industry.
Yeah, I definitely want to dig into that. But I imagine, being a technical individual, what was it in your research and diligence about fuel cells that got you excited and made you want to make that move?
Yeah, I mean, the chemical engineering background does sort of lend itself well to fuel cells. One of the more interesting things about combustion turbines, at least to me, was the thermodynamics, and there's a lot of mechanical principles, and obviously combustion itself is a very intricate chemical reaction, actually more so than I think meets the eye. And then so learning about fuel cells, of course, at their base, many use hydrogen as a fuel, which we can talk about as sort of being a future fuel, carbon free. It's going to be very important in the years and decades to come. But many fuel cells today can and do use natural gas. But they consume that fuel and its energy content in a very different way compared to combustion turbines or diesel engines or anything that you might be familiar with. They consume the fuel electrochemically through a process I think is typically referred to as catalytic oxidation. But it means effectively getting the energy out of the fuel without the use of combustion. And what that means is you're able to achieve very high efficiencies compared to exploding these fuel molecules, but then also you're able to avoid some of the nasty emissions and pollution that you get from combustion processes. And the most common you hear about are nitrogen oxides. And so, to me, that was a good fit. That was a technology I wanted to learn more about, wanted to get some hands-on experience with. And I've been really pleased to learn about the capabilities and help sort of proliferate the technology in the market.
So what is your day-to-day role within the business, Jetson?
Sure. I wear a couple hats. I sit in the commercial operations organization. And so, because of my experience at GE, where I managed and supported many commercial processes, and I've seen how well it can be done. A large part of my role is managing our, a suite of our commercial processes at FuelCell. So it can be as straightforward as supporting our commercial process, sales pacing, helping our salespeople manage their opportunities in our CRM and supporting their process through the proposal, process. If they want to quote some technology, some scope to a customer, it's working with the engineering and technology teams to make sure that we can support it from a performance perspective, working with our sort of manufacturing teams to make sure we can support it from a manufacturing slotting perspective, timeline, equipment delivery, working with our legal team to make sure our T's and C's are up to snuff. There's actually a lot that happens inside a commercial organization to ensure a productive process. And so a big part of my role is supporting that. But then also there's a market strategy, business development element to the role as well. So keeping tabs on market signals, government incentives, markets that suit our products strongly and should influence our commercial strategy, developing sort of strategy playbooks to help drive our commercial endeavors, commercial focus. And then there's, a sort of attending conferences and speaking on behalf of the company, just kind of representing some of the latest and greatest coming out of the fuel cell labs, and getting folks excited about what technology we have to offer.
Yeah. So tell me about the technology and where are you finding the greatest applications today? Is it utility scale? Is it distributed? Is it particular sectors or geographies? From a strategy perspective, what is it that's exciting you right now?
Yeah, I think I need to focus on a few different verticals, we'll call it, because, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we touch on so many different segments of the energy transition. So, at a high level, you have fuel cells for power generation, which is the sort of conventional use. It's the prototypical fuel cell application is just a sort of a distributed generation type application. You've got electrolysis, which is basically a fuel cell operating in reverse. which has huge potential in the market as green hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen becomes increasingly attractive and incentivized. And then you've got sort of niche applications like we have with Toyota and at Long Beach with trigeneration, a fuel cell that produces power, but also produces hydrogen as a product stream. And we've got development work ongoing on a carbon capture application, which is very similar. You're consuming fuel, producing power, but then also capturing that CO2 as opposed to emitting it and cleaning it up so that it can be sequestered or used in an industrial process. So if I just wanted to mention, looking at the prime applications for fuel cells, the markets that value them are markets that want to decarbonize, that really put a value on a low pollution power gen source. And so we see most of our activity in, sub-regions within the US. We see a lot of activity in the EU and the UK. And historically, most of our activity was in Korea. Korea for many, many years has been very bullish on fuel cells. I think, I actually don't know the exact reason why, but I suspect it's because it's a region with particularly high fuel costs. So high efficiency technology is more valued there than it might be elsewhere. And then also perhaps the fuel cells being a non-combustive power generation technology, I think maybe historically was valued heavily there to be able to avoid dealing with NOx emissions and what is very often urban hubs in and around Seoul. So we've got some of the largest fuel cell power plants in the world in Korea, 40, 50, 60 megawatts, which compared to some technologies is modest, but in fuel cell world, that's a proper utility scale power plant.
Yeah, that's incredible. I imagine real estate is probably a challenge for them as well.
Yeah. The power density of fuel cells can be quite attractive.
Yeah.
So definitely a consideration there for sure.
So for customers listening in, Jetson, on the power gen side, are there particular industry sectors where they can gain the most advantage, or why would they consider like a fuel cell versus solar plus battery, or would it be complementary too? I think people would love to hear what your thoughts on the best applications are, or what pain points they may be feeling that a fuel cell should be considered to address.
Yeah, fuel cells are just one of a suite of solutions to help support, the energy industry, energy transition, different commercial and industrial customers. Fuel cells can offer CHP capabilities. So for folks who do rely on some of the thermal output from on-site generation technology today, fuel cells can be a sort of a drop-in solution, maintain that thermal load, increase the efficiency, reduce your emissions profile. When I think about who's going to be a prime benefactor of a fuel cell solution, I imagine someone who needs power generation on site, has a fuel at the ready that they want to use, and then they want to use it very cost efficiently.
Yep.
And with an attractive emissions profile, all things considered. And so being able to use a fuel that's available today to produce one of a selection of product streams gives you that versatility. So whether you need just pure power, whether you need power and heat and a cogeneration application, whether you need CO2 in your process, and you can basically use the carbon capture capabilities of a fuel cell technology to capture CO2 as opposed to emitting it and using it. You have that option. And then ultimately you can also produce power, heat, and hydrogen as a product stream as well. If you're in an area or in an industrial application that can use the hydrogen, or if for some reason or if by chance you're incorporating fuel cell electric vehicles into your business model and you want to incorporate some refueling on site. So very versatile application space for fuel cells. And lastly, I think what I'll say is one reason folks are looking at fuel cells when they're evaluating distributed generation technologies for their commercial or industrial businesses is that, it might be most cost effective for them in a world where they're not considering the emissions profile to go with a reciprocating engine or a small combustion turbine or something. But they know that they're looking to purchase an asset that has a plant life of 20 years or more, and they recognize where we're all at in the energy transition today and how quickly things are moving, and they want an asset that's going to stick around and that's going to be relevant in 5, 10, 15 years and beyond. One thing that we hear from our customers is very attractive about the fuel cell solutions is that they can install one today, operate on natural gas, the fuel that they have available for them at the moment, get pretty good bang for their buck, very high efficiency, low emissions profile. And then as the industry evolves and hydrogen, low carbon or zero carbon hydrogen becomes available to them, they can blend hydrogen at first into fuel cells. We can do that very easily. And then over time, eventually convert to 100% hydrogen fueling, which fuel cells are also capable of today. And because there's no combustion, you don't have to worry about the nitrogen oxides element of hydrogen combustion. You use hydrogen directly as a fuel. Your efficiency actually increases compared to the use of natural gas in fuel cells. And basically, you are now a net neutral on-site power generation technology using hydrogen as a fuel. And you didn't have to pay any incremental capex over, what you did however long ago it was, you decided to go with the fuel cell. So just that longevity it provides, the future-proofing element can be very attractive to folks.
Yeah, it's amazing. And do they come in fixed blocks, Jetson, that customers can size around, or are they custom built for each individual application?
Sure. Yeah, we have two sort of electrochemical architectures, and they serve different purposes, and I can go into some of those details. But our legacy platform, which is called molten carbonate, that technology has a minimum size of 1.4 megawatts capacity. Our newer technology, which is higher efficiency, actually has a smaller minimum footprint. Its minimum capacity is 250 kilowatts.
Wow.
So it's about almost a sixth of the size of the molten carbonate plant. So, and there are reasons why a customer might elect to go for one or the other. Like I said, solid oxide is newer. They're both high temperature electrochemical platforms, but they serve different purposes. And while solid oxide is newer and higher efficiency, and has a smaller size, so it's a bit more can be applied to maybe in some ways a larger application space, because it can attack the smaller scale applications that sometimes molten carbon is too large for. Molten carbonate has some of these capabilities that sort of keep it really interesting, relevant in a variety of applications, including that carbon capture piece. While solid oxide can capture its own carbon as opposed to emitting it, molten carbonate has the capability to capture CO2 from an external source. So again, just sort of a different sort of application set there.
I think we're going to have to do an entire episode just on the technical opportunities of fuel cells. It's super interesting, and I'm learning a lot. And I think there's amazing ways it should be applied, and it should be considered in a lot of different scenarios. I think I'm seeing a lot of buzz around the Toyota partnership and the Tri-Gen project in Long Beach. Would love to learn more about that. What's the background to it, and what's the desired intent and outcomes
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're very, very happy about the progress made with our Toyota Port of Long Beach project. Interestingly, it just went commercially with COD in September, I believe, of 2023. So just last month. So yeah, what's really interesting about this project is we've taken what we call our SureSource 3000, which is our molten carbonate power plant rated at 2.8 megawatt capacity. So it's sort of on a two by the minimum size, 2 modules. And what we've done is develop this project where we consume biogas. It's, in this case, directed biogas within the state of California. And we use the biogas as a fuel in what we call the trigeneration platform. We produce on the order of 2.3 megawatts of power, which help to support the Toyota operations, the port operations there, which is a derate from our power plant nameplate capacity. And the reason for that is we divert some of what would ultimately have been electrical energy into a hydrogen product stream. And because we're using biogas as a fuel, this hydrogen is very low carbon. It doesn't necessarily fit in the blue, green, gray. I mean, in some jurisdictions, it's considered green. I've heard recently, actually, that hydrogen from waste streams might be called orange hydrogen. I don't know. Nevertheless, on a carbon accounting basis, it can be considered very low carbon, and this hydrogen is used on site and the port operations to fill Toyota Mirai vehicles, fuel cell electric vehicles coming off the ships from their Asian manufacturing hubs. They're refueled at the port and sent on their way to the car dealerships.
Wow.
So they're able to leverage that hydrogen product stream. They're able to leverage the power generation. And then also the third of the 3 value streams for trigeneration is actually water. It is a net water positive technology platform in this application. And in a place like Los Angeles, that means something. Some places have plenty of water and it's not necessarily a concern. Los Angeles, I don't believe, is one of those places. And so they're able to use the water for some of their port operations, I think vehicle cleaning and some stuff like that. So just just in the fact that it's able to help reduce the demand of the Toyota operations on the local water supply, they're very pleased with that value stream as well.
Yeah, that's incredible, especially in the state of California. My wife's a hydrogeologist, so she's looking at water resources all day, every day. And yeah, it's definitely a concern. Even with a few good years of rain, people think that we've kind of overcome it, but the aquifers have been absolutely devastated, and any water, preservation is critical.
I agree. Yeah, and that's a whole different but extremely interesting space to keep an eye on. So I'm sure you have a pretty good purview given your wife's work.
Yeah.
I'd be really curious to pick your brain on that topic sometime.
Yeah, it's in the house. Energy and water, I think, 2 of the most critical items in our lives, and so it becomes some interesting and sometimes concerning conversations. But so, in terms of project deal flow and incentives in the market, you're seeing the IRA stimulating a lot of interest and opportunity for you guys?
Totally. Yeah, there's an ITC in the US that we've had for some time, specific to fuel cells. And so that's been extended with the IRA. So sort of the business as usual case has been extended, we'll call it, with the IRA. But then also one thing that we're seeing a ton of interest in that I mentioned is green hydrogen production via electrolysis. And as I think you're probably familiar, there is a stipulation in the IRA that supports up to $3 per kilogram of green hydrogen produced. as a production tax credit, for the producer. So it's a supply side tax incentive, and that has really lit a fire under a lot of development. I've been reading a lot about how the passage of the IRA has potentially pulled some money and some interest from other markets into the US. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because the European market is sort of deciding to pass their own similar legislation to try to keep some of those dollars over on their side of the Atlantic. But because of the impact of the IRA, we've gotten quite a bit of interest in our electrolysis product, which I haven't spent too much time talking about in this conversation so far. But I think the short story with solid oxide electrolysis, I'll just throw in here, is that compared to conventional electrolysis technologies, namely alkaline and PEM, solid oxide is significantly more efficient. And that can mean a lot when you're trying to get the most hydrogen out for every renewable electron you're using in the system. Renewable electrons are precious. We shouldn't let them go to waste, and we should get as much hydrogen out of them as possible. So,
what are your thoughts on green hydrogen? There's obviously a lot of hype around it. Do you think there's validity behind the hype, and are you on board with it?
I think there are people who claim that hydrogen is just the one single solution to a whole suite of problems. And then there are obviously on the other side detractors who don't think hydrogen is going to serve much purpose in the energy space. But I think folks who consider the real applications for which hydrogen can make a meaningful and cost-effective impact in the energy transition probably have it right. There are applications that are absolutely going to need to be met with hydrogen. Applications for which direct electrification is not a feasible solution. There are a lot of industrial applications which require, a molecular energy carrier. They require high heat that is very difficult to achieve with electricity. And then obviously there are just chemical processes that require hydrogen. The most important of which being ammonia production for the fertilizer industry. I mean, to my understanding, our agricultural industries have become extremely reliant on fertilizers. We'll just say that, and we're going to continue to need hydrogen to support that industry. And so, at a minimum, being able to support that industry with a lower carbon option compared to steam methane reformed hydrogen is going to make a huge climate impact. And so for that reason alone, low carbon hydrogen should be pursued. Nevertheless, let alone all the other applications which can be served very well with low carbon hydrogen.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting space and one I'm keen to follow. We do like to ask our guests, if there could be any energy technology, what would they be and why? Even within your portfolio, you've got lots of different solutions. Which one excites you the most and why?
In our suite, I really think the solid oxide fuel cell is probably the most versatile and the most interesting because of its versatility. I think there's this trend in the industry to move towards distributed generation. Folks definitely want less reliance on the grid. And I don't think that's going to change. And so as folks are pursuing distributed generation technologies, the fact that solid oxide can be there to support changes today with very high efficiency and, pretty attractive operational flexibility, and then be there for customers through the energy transition, through the fuel transition phase into what we might see, before so long in, a hydrogen economy, to 100% hydrogen fuel, zero carbon, very high efficiency. I think that is just really, really interesting. And it plays as distributed generation does, in this huge application space. It's industrial customers, it's utility scale applications, it's commercial businesses. nearly everyone can benefit from technologies in the distributed generation space. And I think solid oxide just has this really interesting runway to support customers of all shapes and sizes, both today and down the line. And to me, that's if I had to pick one, I'd have to be in that camp.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think certainly from a perspective that VECKTA's come into the industry at, fuel cells should be considered in every on-site energy opportunity, at least proposed to customers, because I think that transition versatility is super interesting to a lot of people. And I know that there's a shift away from using gas as a fuel source, or a desire to do that. But I think it's critical to a successful transition. And especially if you can invest in an asset that doesn't necessarily then have to rely on it, it can use that. The hydrogen as an input is really exciting.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting to see. It's not a solution that suits every single application, like you say. It should be included in the evaluation, and it should be evaluated on its own merit. But the more people are aware of it, I think the more folks are going to realize it's a really good fit for their personal individual energy transition journey.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm excited to get people's feedback from this around. I definitely want to learn more, so we'll dig in and do an individual episode just on the technology itself. Cool. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation and great career. Fuel cells are super exciting, and I'm definitely excited to learn a lot more about them. To close us out, Jetson, if you could listen to anyone on this podcast, who would it be, and what would you ask them?
That's a great question. There's so many interesting energy professionals that you could speak to and learn so much from. One individual I find particularly fascinating is Jigar Shah at the DOE Loan Programs Office. I follow him on LinkedIn. I just think he's always got really interesting wisdom being shared with the industry, and naturally he's in this really unique position in DOE to just see the state of the industry and all the new technologies coming to market, and sort of somewhat influential or in control even in some cases, in supporting some of these technologies coming to market for the first time. So as part of this discussion and being really interesting and first of a kind of applications, I think Jigar would have some really interesting stories to tell about his experience in that space. So yeah, see what you can do there.
Yeah,
best of luck.
Jigar, you've been called out, and we've actually got an affinity towards him because Dan and I, who I co-host this with, we met through mutually commenting on one of Jigar's posts, and then we LinkedIn dated for a while and ended up working together. So we've got
it's a testament to. I mean, he gets a lot of dialogue even in the comments of his posts, and you get these chance interactions that change the course of your professional career. It sounds so. Yeah, amazing stuff.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure, Jetson. It's been wonderful having you. We'll definitely have you back because fuel cells are an amazing technology that we'll all need to learn a lot more about.
So I really appreciate the time, Gareth. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Have a great one.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at vecta.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.